As we step into this new year, most of us are already making plans, new goals, new habits we want to build. Maybe there's something you're finally ready to let go of, an old pattern that no longer serves you, or something new you want to integrate into your life. But here's what the Buddha understood. Before we rush toward the future, we need to pause and ask one honest question. Are you already caught in a habit without realizing it? Are you still on the path you intended to walk? Or have you drifted somewhere else entirely? This is the perfect time to take what the Buddha called a personal retreat, not traveling anywhere, just stepping back into yourself. Asking the question that changes everything. What are you essentially looking for in this life? Regardless of how old you are right now, how much of what you wanted have you actually achieved? And more importantly, are you still moving toward it? Or have you lost your way? Before you know which direction to sail, you must first know where you're standing. The Buddha taught this clearly. Observe your surroundings right now. They tell you where you are. Then, look inside. How do you feel about the life you're living at this moment? You had 365 days last year. Where did they take you? Where did you grow? Where did something decline? Over the next 3 hours, we're going to find that answer together. If it feels right, let me know where you're listening from, and let's begin. In the Buddhist tradition, there's a simple teaching. If something appears in your lifetime that you like, you see it, you hear it, something comes into your life, and you like it, the teaching says, don't pull. Don't pull it toward you. And if something appears in your lifetime that you don't like, something you would normally reject, the teaching says, don't push. Don't push it away. Now, where does this come from? What does it mean? If you start to pull something toward you, you like it, so you want to keep it as close as possible. Bring it even closer than it naturally is. What's going to happen? One day, when the time comes, whatever you tried to pull toward you will simply move away from you. It's just a question of time. At the same time, something comes and you reject it right from the beginning. You push it away. You don't want it near you. It's just a question of time until whatever you push away starts to move very close to you. This is what the Buddha called clinging, upadana, in the ancient language. It's the root of all suffering. Just watch around you. From the moment anyone is born, from the very moment of the first breath, the amount of inhalation and exhalation is exactly 50-50. The amount of days and the amount of nights, until right now, 50-50. It looks like this wave, this natural rhythm, and in many different traditions, the teaching is simple. Nothing stays the way it is. Success never stays success, because success is based upon failure. A healthy person never stays only healthy. He is healthy because sickness exists. A rich man never stays rich forever. He is only rich right now because poorness also exists. Now the question becomes, if you realize this for yourself, if you see that right now things are really good, your work is going well, your health is strong, everything feels aligned, but then you also realize that now you're about to lose things. Now it's not working well anymore. You don't know what's wrong. What do? You invest energy again. You push yourself up. You use your skills and knowledge to make it work. But no matter how hard you try, it starts to descend again. It feels like it's not in your hands anymore. And this is where the question arises. After observing this pattern often enough, maybe one day you're going to ask yourself, there must be another way of walking through this lifetime without always being caught inside these ups and downs. This is what the Buddha discovered under the Bodhi tree. This constant grasping at what we want and pushing away what we don't want, this is what keeps the wheel of suffering turning. People hold on to so many things without even realizing it. Old beliefs about who they are, about how life should look, expired identities, the person you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even last year, still carrying that image, still defending it, still trying to prove it's real. The Buddha called these mental formations sankhara. They accumulate inside us, layer after layer, year after year. And from time to time, they start to block us. Think about it for a moment. How much of what you believe about yourself right now is actually based on who you were, not who you are? How many of your reactions today are simply old patterns repeating themselves, mental formations that hardened into habits 20 years ago? Someone criticizes you, and immediately you feel defensive. But is that really about what they just said? Or is it about something a teacher told you when you were 12? Someone offers you love, and you pull back. But is that really about them? Or is it about the person who left when you were young? These formations run deep. They operate below conscious awareness most of the time, but they shape everything. How you see the world, how you interpret events, how you respond to life. Sometimes these formations become so familiar that you mistake them for who you are. The anxious person thinks, I am anxiety. The angry person thinks, I am anger. But the Buddha taught differently. These are conditions that arose based on causes. They are not you. When you were you born anxious? Or did anxiety develop over time, shaped by experiences, conditioned by events, reinforced by repetition? If it arose from conditions, then when those conditions change, it can also cease. This is the hope within the teaching. Nothing is permanent, including your suffering. There's an old Zen teaching about a monk who came to his master with an empty bowl. The master asked, "What do you want?" The monk said, "I want to receive the teachings. I want wisdom. I want enlightenment." The master picked up a teapot and started pouring tea into the monk's bowl. He poured and poured, and when the bowl was full, he kept pouring. The tea spilled over the sides, onto the floor, soaking the monk's robes. The monk shouted, "Master, stop! Can't you see the bowl is full? No more will go in." The master smiled and put down the teapot. Like this bowl, you are full of your own opinions, your own ideas, your own beliefs about what you already know. How can I show you the Dharma when you have no room to receive it? First, empty your bowl. This is why letting go is necessary. Not because what you're holding is bad or wrong, but because your hands are full. You cannot receive anything new when you're clinging to everything old. And here's something most people discover when they start practicing. Letting go isn't just one thing. It's not a single moment where you release everything and suddenly you're free. It's a process with different layers, different depths. The Buddha taught this clearly. There are two parts to letting go, and both are necessary. The first part is willingness. This is what the Buddha called right intention, samma sankappa. Do you want to let go? Are you willing? Many people say yes immediately. Yes, I want to let go of my anger. I want to let go of my fear. I want to let go of this old pain. The willingness is there. But then there's the second part, wisdom, understanding, and sometimes simply ability. Can you actually let go, even if you want to? This is where it gets honest. This is where clear seeing of yourself becomes necessary. In the monasteries, this pattern appears again and again. Someone comes with genuine willingness to change, to release old patterns. They sit in meditation, they follow the precepts, they work diligently. But when the moment comes to actually face what they're holding on to, when anger arises, or fear surfaces, or that old familiar story starts playing in the mind, suddenly the willingness alone isn't enough. There needs to be skill. There needs to be understanding. There needs to be knowledge of how to work with what arises. Some things can be released through personal practice. Sitting in meditation, watching the thought arise, watching it pass away, seeing it's not solid, not permanent, not who you are. And slowly, over time, the grip loosens. These are the defilements you can work with yourself. The small irritations, the passing judgments, the daily reactive patterns. The tools exist for this. Mindfulness, concentration, clear seeing. These practices gradually create freedom. The Buddha compared this to washing clothes. You don't wash them once, and they're clean forever. You wash them regularly, each time removing a little more dirt, a little more staining. The mind is similar. Each time you sit, each time you practice, you're washing away a little more of what doesn't belong. But sometimes there are things caught within us that cannot be reached alone. The Buddha knew this. This is why he established the Sangha, the community of practitioners. Sometimes, even if the willingness is there, even if you can see what's stuck inside you, support is needed. A teacher, a community, someone who has walked this path before and can show where the hidden locks are. This isn't weakness. This is wisdom. Knowing when you can work alone and when you need help, this itself is part of clear seeing. The Buddhist masters teach, those who can proceed on their own are only those who went deeper first. That depth often comes from having support, from having someone point out what you cannot see yourself. Think of it like trying to see your own back. No matter how much you twist and turn, you cannot see all of it without a mirror or another person. Some parts of ourselves are like this. We need others to reflect them back to us. The Buddha said in the Salatha Sutta, an uninstructed ordinary person feels pleasure, feels pain, feels neither pleasure nor pain. So does a well-instructed disciple of the noble ones. What difference is there between them? The difference is this. When pain comes to the ordinary person, he not only feels the pain, but also resists it, clings to the wish that it would go away, creates a second layer of suffering on top of the first. The Buddha called this the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain itself. This cannot always be avoided. Life brings illness, loss, change, disappointment. But the second arrow is the one shot at ourselves through clinging and resistance. When you try to push away what you don't like, you create suffering. When you try to pull close and hold forever what you do like, you create suffering. This is why the Buddha taught the middle way. Not pulling, not pushing, not grasping at pleasure, not fleeing from pain. Both are impermanent, anicca. Both arise and pass away like clouds in the sky. Watch your breath right now for just a moment. The inhalation comes naturally. You don't have to pull the air in desperately, clutching at it. The exhalation leaves naturally. You don't have to push it out forcefully, rejecting it. The breath simply moves in its own rhythm, balanced, 50-50, natural. This balanced breath is always available to you. In any moment of grasping or pushing, you can return to it. Feel the natural rhythm. Notice how the body already knows how to let go. With every exhalation, it releases. It doesn't hold on to the old air, trying to keep it. It simply lets it go, trusting that the next breath will come. This is how the Buddha taught us to meet life. When something pleasant comes, you can enjoy it without grasping. When something unpleasant comes, you can experience it without running away. But this takes training. It's not automatic. It's not something you understand once with your thinking mind and then you're done. It requires what Buddhist practice calls continuous effort, daily, honest practice. You have to see for yourself where you're still pulling, where you're still pushing. Where in your life right now are you trying to hold on to something that's already changing? Where are you resisting something that's already here? Maybe it's a relationship that's shifting, and you're trying to keep it exactly as it was 5 years ago. Maybe it's your body changing with age, and you're fighting every sign of it. Maybe it's your career not going the way you planned, and you're still pushing toward a destination that no longer makes sense. Or perhaps it's smaller, more subtle. The way you cling to being right in arguments. The way you push away feedback that challenges your self-image. The way you grasp at compliments and reject criticism, even when both might contain truth. This honest assessment, this is the wisdom part of letting go. And sometimes this wisdom comes from sitting quietly with yourself. Sometimes it comes from a teacher pointing it out. Sometimes it comes from the Sangha, from fellow practitioners who reflect back what you cannot see. In monastic training, teachers often observe students carrying heavy burdens. Years of anger toward a parent who was harsh and demanding. The student wants to let go of this anger. The willingness is completely there. But every time the parent's voice arises in memory, every time that old tightness appears in the chest, the release doesn't happen. The teacher might ask, when you hold this anger, what are you actually holding on to? The student sits with this question for a long time, then quietly realizes, I'm holding on to being right, to my father being wrong, to my pain mattering. This becomes the breakthrough. It's not just anger being held. It's an identity as the wronged child, a belief that if the anger is released, somehow the suffering wouldn't have mattered, the parent would be off the hook. Once this is seen clearly, the letting go becomes possible. Not easy, but possible. Because the student realizes letting go of anger doesn't mean the pain didn't matter. It doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means choosing to stop drinking the poison of resentment while hoping someone else will die from it. The Buddha discovered something profound about this constant pushing and pulling, this endless cycle of wanting and not wanting. He discovered that beneath all of it, there's a deep misunderstanding. People think that by controlling their experience, by pulling the good close and pushing the bad away, they can finally be at peace. But the opposite is true. Peace comes when the pulling and the pushing stop altogether. When life is met as it is, not as you wish it would be. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean stopping care or stopping action. The Buddha himself was incredibly active, teaching for 45 years, walking from village to village, establishing communities, training thousands of monks and nuns. But he did all of this without clinging, without grasping, without the desperate pushing and pulling that creates suffering. He often said, I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering. And the end of suffering begins with seeing clearly what you're holding on to, not judging it, not fighting it, just seeing it. Right now, in this moment, what are you carrying that you don't need to carry anymore? What expired belief? What old identity? What fear or worry or hope that's actually just weighing you down? The willingness to let go. This you can choose right now. The wisdom and ability to actually release it. This comes through practice, sometimes through support, always through patience with yourself. For new things to come, all things must go. Not all at once, not violently or forcefully, but gradually, naturally, like leaves falling from a tree when autumn comes. The tree doesn't push the leaves away. The leaves don't cling desperately to the branches. There's just a natural release, a letting go that happens when the time is right. The tree doesn't worry that without its leaves it will be naked, vulnerable, diminished. It trusts the cycle. It knows that letting go is not loss. It's preparation for new growth. In winter, when the branches are bare, the tree is not dead. It's resting, gathering strength, preparing. And when spring comes, new leaves will grow. Not the same leaves, but new ones, fresh ones, suited to this new season. This is what practice teaches, to recognize when the time has come, to open your hands and let the old patterns, the old suffering, the old ways of being simply fall away. Because only then is there space for something new to grow. The Buddha taught something very specific about suffering that most people miss. He said that when pain comes, and pain will come to everyone, there are actually 2 arrows, not 1. The first arrow is the pain itself. Someone you love gets sick. You lose your job. Your body ages and begins to hurt. A relationship ends. This is the first arrow, and the Buddha was clear. This arrow you cannot always avoid. Life shoots this arrow at everyone, rich or poor, wise or foolish, young or old. The first arrow comes. This is simply the nature of existence. But then there's the second arrow. And this one, you shoot at yourself. The second arrow is your reaction to the pain, your resistance to it, your fear of it, your story about what it means, your worry about what comes next. The Buddha said in the Salatha Sutta, when touched with a feeling of pain, the uninstructed person sorrows, grieves, and laments, beats his breast, becomes distraught. So he feels 2 pains, physical and mental, just as if they were to shoot a man with an arrow and, right afterward, were to shoot him with another one, so that he would feel the pains of 2 arrows. But the instructed disciple, when touched with that same feeling of pain, does not sorrow, grieve, or lament, does not beat his breast or become distraught. So he feels 1 pain, physical, but not mental. This is the difference. Not that the pain doesn't come, but that the second arrow, the one made of fear and resistance and mental proliferation, that one you can learn not to shoot. And fear is almost always that second arrow. Think about it carefully for a moment. Where does fear actually live? Fear lives in tomorrow. Fear lives in next week, next month, next year. Fear lives in the imagined future, in the story you're telling yourself about what might happen. But where is fear in this breath? Right now, as you breathe in, as you breathe out, where is the fear? The Buddha taught this clearly. Fear is a mental construction. The mind creates it, just as the mind creates everything else. And the same mind that can create beautiful visions, inspiring dreams, powerful motivations, that exact same mind creates fear. In the Shaolin teachings, Master Shi Hengyi puts it simply, you fear that a car is going to hit you tomorrow, but hello, we are not in tomorrow. We are here right now. Why are you thinking about tomorrow? Where is the car that's going to hit you? Where is the evidence it's going to happen? Where is the evidence it's not going to happen? You don't know. Stop thinking about tomorrow. The music is playing here right now. This is the truth about fear that's so hard to accept. Most of what you fear exists only in your mind. Not the real dangers. Those are different. If a car is actually coming at you right now, your body responds instantly, without fear, just pure action. You jump out of the way. No thinking, no story, just movement. But the fear of what might happen tomorrow, next week, someday, that's different. That's what the Buddha called papaninka, mental proliferation, the mind spinning out stories upon stories. One thought leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another, until you're living in a completely imagined nightmare that has nothing to do with what's actually happening right now. You think, what if I lose my job? Then, if I lose my job, I can't pay rent. Then, if I can't pay rent, I'll be homeless. Then, if I'm homeless, I'll lose everything. Then, everyone will see I'm a failure. Then, I'll die alone, and no one will care. And suddenly, you're suffering intensely, not from losing your job, because you haven't lost your job, but from a story your mind created in about 30 seconds. This is the second arrow. This is the suffering you create for yourself through fear. But here's what meditation practitioners learn that others often don't. Fear doesn't have to disappear for you to be free from it. This surprises people. They think the goal is to eliminate fear completely, to reach some state where you never feel afraid. But that's not what the Buddha taught, and it's not what happens in practice. What changes is your relationship to fear. When you sit in meditation, especially when you sit for long periods, fear comes up. Physical discomfort arises. Your knee hurts. Your back aches. You want to move. And with that discomfort comes fear. What if I'm injuring myself? What if I can't handle this? What if I have to stop and everyone will see I'm weak. But you stay. You keep sitting. You breathe with the discomfort. You observe the fear. And something interesting happens. The fear is still there, but you realize you're not afraid of it. You're watching it, like watching clouds pass in the sky. Oh, there's fear. There's the thought that I can't do this. There's the tightness in my chest. There's the impulse to run away. All of it arises, and all of it passes, and you're still sitting, still breathing, still here. This is how the relationship transforms. Not that fear stops arising. It arises when conditions are present for it to arise, just like everything else. But you stop being controlled by it. You stop believing every story it tells. You stop shooting the second arrow. There's a teaching from the Tibetan tradition about Milarepa, one of Tibet's greatest yogis. He was meditating alone in a cave in the mountains, practicing intensely for months on end. One day, demons appeared in his cave, terrifying creatures with horrible faces, threatening him, trying to scare him away. At first, Milarepa tried to get rid of them. He recited prayers, visualized protective deities, used all the methods he knew to banish these demons. But they wouldn't leave. Then he tried reasoning with them, teaching them the Dharma, hoping they would see the error of their ways and depart peacefully. But still they remained, more threatening than before. Finally, exhausted from fighting and negotiating, Milarepa did something different. He looked directly at the demons and said, "I see you are just my own mind. I am not going anywhere, and neither, it seems, are you. So come, let us have tea together." And he sat down peacefully in their presence. No fear, no resistance, no trying to push them away. Just sitting, accepting what is. At that moment, all the demons, except one, disappeared instantly. And the last one, the biggest, most terrifying demon, opened its mouth wide, as if to devour him. Milarepa walked right up to that demon and placed his head inside its mouth. "If you're going to eat me, he said. "I'm not running anymore." And the final demon vanished like mist in the sunlight. This is the teaching. The demons are your own mind. The fears are projections, mental formations, papanyenka, and they have only as much power as you give them by running away. When you stop running, when you turn and face what you're afraid of, when you stop shooting the second arrow, the fear loses its grip. Not because it disappears, but because you're no longer afraid of being afraid. In the Shaolin tradition, this is understood deeply through the practice of martial arts. Master Shi Heng Yi explains, "Fighting is not fun. Fighting against somebody else who is also trained, even with gloves on, is quite painful sometimes. And very honestly, I don't like to fight, but I feel the challenge about it. I feel how much I need to jump over myself now to go out there, even if it's just training." So for a martial artist, it becomes different when it comes to fear. Because all the time when you walk out there, you are dealing with fear. Fear of what if I lose? What if he hits me? What if I get hurt? What if I don't stand up anymore? So many fears you are dealing with. But ultimately, you conquer them. And once you conquer them in one area of life, the outlook on the rest of life changes. It changes something inside. It changes the perspective on how you look at things. You see other people living in fear, but fear of nothing. Fear of something they created with their mind. This doesn't mean martial artists or meditators don't feel fear. They do, but they've learned that fear is just a feeling, just a mental formation, just papanyanka, and it's not something to let your life be determined by. Now, here's something deeper that the Buddha taught about fear, something that goes to the very root of why we experience it so intensely. Fear is primarily about self-preservation. Fear protects the sense of I, me, mine. Fear of death, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of rejection. All of these are fundamentally about protecting what you believe to be yourself. But the Buddha's teaching on anatta, non-self, reveals something radical. The self you're so busy protecting, the self you're so afraid for, it's not what you think it is. The Buddha taught that when you look for this solid, permanent, independent self, you cannot find it. You find a body, but is that you? The body is constantly changing, constantly in flux. Cells dying and being born, matter and energy, exchanging with the environment every moment. If the body is you, which body? The one from 10 years ago, the one right now, the one 10 years from now. You find feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, arising, and passing constantly. Are you your feelings? Which feeling is the real you? The happiness or the sadness, the calm or the anxiety? They all come and go like weather. You find perceptions, mental formations, consciousness itself, all arising and passing based on conditions, none of them solid, none of them permanent, none of them independent. So who is it that's afraid? What exactly are you protecting? This is not a philosophical question meant to confuse you. It's a direct invitation to look clearly at your actual experience. When fear arises, who is afraid? You might say, I am afraid. But look closer. There's a sensation in the chest, tightness, maybe. There's a thought, something bad will happen. There's perhaps an image in the mind of a future scenario. There's an impulse to run or hide or fight. But where in all of this is the I who is afraid? There's just the process of fear arising. Sensations, thoughts, impulses, all interdependent, all conditioned, all impermanent. When you see this clearly, something profound shifts. The fear doesn't necessarily stop arising, but the identification with it loosens. You're not a fearful person. You're a person experiencing fear right now. And that fear, like everything else, will pass. The Buddha taught that all of our suffering comes from clinging to what he called the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, and believing them to be me or mine. Fear is rooted in this belief. My body might get hurt. My reputation might be damaged. My plans might fail. My loved ones might leave. My life might end. All of this is fear trying to protect I, me, mine. But when you investigate closely, you find that this I you're protecting is itself just another mental formation, another concept, another thought arising in consciousness. This doesn't mean you don't exist. Clearly something is here, reading these words, breathing, experiencing. But what exists is not what fear thinks it's protecting. What exists is this flowing, changing, interdependent process that we conventionally call you. A process that doesn't need protection because it's already inseparable from everything else. When this is understood, not just intellectually, but through direct experience, fear loses much of its power. What is there to protect? What can actually be lost? Your body will age and die. This is certain. Everything you're attached to will eventually separate from you. This is certain. Every condition you're experiencing right now will change. This is certain. But when you realize that none of this is ultimately you in the way fear believes, when you see that what you truly are cannot be diminished or destroyed because it was never a separate, solid thing to begin with, the fear of loss becomes less overwhelming. This is what the Buddha discovered about courage, and it might surprise you. Real courage is not the absence of fear. Real courage is not having to pump yourself up or convince yourself you're brave. Real courage comes from seeing through the illusion that fear is trying to protect. When you understand deeply that there is no solid, separate self that can be destroyed, the fear of death loses its absolute power. When you understand that everything you're attached to is impermanent and was never really yours to begin with, the fear of loss becomes workable. When you understand that failure and success are just concepts, just mental formations arising and passing, the fear of failure becomes just another experience to be met with awareness. This doesn't mean you become reckless or careless. The Buddha wasn't teaching nihilism or suggesting that nothing matters. You still take care of the body. You still act with wisdom and compassion. You still engage with life fully. But you're not enslaved by fear anymore. You're not making all your decisions based on protecting an illusion. You're not shooting the second arrow at yourself constantly. Master Shi Heng Yi says it clearly. If you want to know what to fear, this is the fearful part. One day, you look back and say, "You have wasted your lifetime." This is the fearful part. Not the fear of what might happen in some imagined future, but the fear of reaching the end of your life and realizing you spent the whole time running from shadows, protecting something that was never real, avoiding challenges that could have helped you grow, all because you believed the stories your fear told you. That's the only fear worth paying attention to, the fear of wasting this precious human life, living in delusion. Everything else, the fear of loss, the fear of failure, the fear of pain, the fear of death, these are just the mind doing what minds do, creating stories, projecting futures, trying to control what cannot be controlled. The practice is to recognize these fears when they arise, to see them clearly as mental formations, to understand their impermanent nature, and to choose not to shoot the second arrow. To say to the fear, like Milarepa said to his demons, "I see you are just my own mind. Come, let us have tea together." And then to place your head in the demon's mouth if you must, to walk directly into what you're afraid of, with clear awareness, knowing that the fear cannot actually destroy what you truly are, because what you truly are was never what the fear thought it was, protecting. This is the freedom the Buddha taught. Not freedom from ever experiencing fear. That would be impossible while you're alive in a human body with a human mind. But freedom from being controlled by fear, from letting fear determine the shape of your entire life, from shooting that second arrow again and again and again. Fear is just nothing to let your life be determined by. When you understand this deeply, not just as an idea, but as lived experience, something opens up. You can take risks you wouldn't have taken. You can speak truths you wouldn't have spoken. You can pursue challenges you wouldn't have pursued. You can love without holding back, knowing loss will come, but choosing to love anyway. Because you've seen through the illusion that fear was trying to protect. You've placed your head in the demon's mouth and found nothing there but empty space. And in that empty space, there's freedom. There's a teaching in the Buddhist tradition about strength that most people misunderstand. When we think of becoming stronger, we usually imagine building ourselves up against something, against weakness, against enemies, against the world that might harm us. But the Buddha taught a different kind of strength entirely. This strength doesn't need an enemy to define itself. It doesn't come from domination or aggression, or even from winning. It comes from something quieter, something more fundamental, from living in alignment with what the Buddha called right action. Right action, samma kammanta, in the ancient language, is the fourth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's one of the three factors that make up sila, ethical conduct, the foundation of all Buddhist practice. And here's what surprises people. The Buddha didn't teach right action as a list of rules to constrain you. He taught it as a form of protection, a way of building strength that no external force can shake. Think about it this way. When you harm another being, through violence, through theft, through sexual misconduct, through lies, through intoxication that clouds your mind, what happens inside you? There's guilt, even if you don't admit it. There's fear of being discovered. There's the need to hide, to defend, to justify. There's a subtle weakening of your own integrity, like a crack appearing in a foundation. Each time you act in ways that harm, you create instability within yourself. You cannot stand firmly when you're constantly managing the consequences of harmful actions, constantly defending yourself, constantly looking over your shoulder. But when you live by right action, when you abstain from killing, from taking what's not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, from intoxication, something different happens. You become stable. You have nothing to hide, nothing to defend. You can meet anyone's eyes directly. You can sleep peacefully at night because your conscience is clear. You stand on solid ground. This is the foundation of real strength, not strength built on dominating others, but strength built on integrity, on wholesome action, on living in harmony with the way things actually are. The Buddha said in the Dhammapada, "Though one may conquer 1,000 times 1,000 men in battle, yet he indeed is the noblest victor who conquers himself." This is the true battlefield, not out there against enemies, but right here, within your own mind and actions. Conquering yourself doesn't mean being violent with yourself, punishing yourself, or forcing yourself into rigid submission. It means something much more subtle. It means developing the capacity to choose your actions wisely, rather than being driven by impulse, craving, aversion, and delusion. This requires two qualities that the Buddha taught together: metta and virya. Metta, loving kindness, goodwill toward yourself and others. And virya, energy, effort, the sustained determination to practice. You need metta because without kindness toward yourself, discipline becomes harsh and ultimately unsustainable. You beat yourself up for every failure. You demand perfection. You turn practice into punishment. And eventually, you break or you quit. But you also need virya because without sustained effort, kindness alone becomes soft, passive, an excuse for not trying. Oh, I'll be kind to myself and not practice today. I'll be gentle with myself and avoid this challenge. I'll have compassion for my weakness and never push myself to grow. The Buddha taught the middle way between these extremes: strength with kindness, effort with wisdom, discipline without violence toward yourself or others. Now, virya. This word is often translated as energy or effort, and it's one of the 5 spiritual faculties that the Buddha said must be developed for awakening. But it's important to understand what kind of energy this is. It's not aggressive force. It's not the energy of pushing and striving and forcing outcomes. It's not the manic energy of someone running away from themselves through constant activity. Virya is sustained effort. It's the energy that shows up day after day, not because it's exciting or because you feel inspired, but because you've made a commitment to practice. It's the energy that gets you to sit in meditation even when you don't want to. The energy that helps you keep a precept even when breaking it would be easier. The energy that allows you to face a difficult situation with awareness rather than running away. And crucially, it's balanced energy, not too tight, not too loose. The Buddha taught this through a story about his disciple Sona, who was practicing walking meditation so intensely that his feet bled. But despite all his effort, he wasn't making progress. He was becoming discouraged, thinking maybe he should just give up and return to lay life. The Buddha asked him, "Sona, before you became a monk, were you skilled at playing the lute?" "Yes, Lord," Sona replied. "And when the strings of your lute were too tight, was it in tune and playable?" "No, Lord." "And when the strings were too loose, was it in tune and playable?" "No, Lord." "But when the strings were neither too tight nor too loose, but adjusted to an even tension, was your lute in tune and playable?" "Yes, Lord." In the same way, Sona, if energy is too forceful, it leads to restlessness. If energy is too lax, it leads to laziness. Therefore, keep your energy in balance, find the right pitch, and there you will make progress. This teaching is profound in its simplicity. The lute strings must be tuned just right, not according to someone else's standard, but according to what creates beautiful music from that particular instrument. You are that instrument, and you must learn, through patient experimentation, what level of effort allows you to play the beautiful music of a well-lived life. For some people, the strings are chronically too loose. They drift through life without real commitment, without sustained effort, always taking the easy path, always choosing comfort over growth. Their spiritual practice, if they have one, is casual and inconsistent. They meditate when they feel like it, follow precepts when it's convenient, and wonder why nothing much changes. For others, the strings are perpetually too tight. They approach practice with such intensity, such forceful determination, that they create more suffering than they release. They sit in meditation grimacing with effort. They take on vows they can't possibly keep. They push themselves relentlessly towards some imagined perfection. Both extremes prevent the beautiful music from emerging. This is the middle way applied to effort itself, finding the right tension, the sustainable pace, the effort that you can maintain, not just for a day or a week, but for a lifetime. Too many people approach practice like Sona approached his walking meditation, with intense, forceful effort that burns them out quickly. They meditate for 3 hours a day for 2 weeks and then quit completely. They take on strict vows they can't maintain. They exhaust themselves trying to force enlightenment to happen. This is not virya. This is the strings of the lute tuned too tight. The Buddha taught gradual training, anupubikatha, building capacity slowly, sustainably, like a tree growing strong roots before it reaches for the sky. You start with simple practices. 5 minutes of meditation in the morning, following one precept carefully for a month, speaking truthfully for one full day, without exaggeration or deception. Then you build from there. 10 minutes of meditation, 2 precepts, truthful speech for a week. Each small success gives you confidence. Each period of sustained effort builds your capacity for more effort. You're not forcing yourself into an unnatural mold. You're training, gradually, like an athlete builds endurance over time. This is how real strength develops, not through dramatic efforts that can't be sustained, but through consistent, balanced practice that becomes integrated into your life. Now, as you develop this strength, as you train in right action and balanced effort, you'll inevitably face challenges. Difficulties will arise. This is guaranteed. And the Buddha taught 2 responses to challenge that sound simple, but require real wisdom to apply. The first response: don't flee. Face what arises with awareness. The second response: honestly assess your capacities. Know when to engage and when to step back. These might sound contradictory, but they're not. They're 2 sides of the same wisdom. Don't flee means when something difficult arises, your first instinct shouldn't be to run away. Because running away means you lose the opportunity to learn from what's arising. You create distance between yourself and the challenge, and in that distance, you have no connection and therefore no influence. If you always avoid difficult conversations, you never learn how to communicate through conflict. If you always quit when practice gets hard, you never develop the capacity to sit with discomfort. If you always choose comfort over challenge, you remain forever in the same small circle of what's familiar. So the first response is to stay, to turn toward what's difficult rather than away, to meet the challenge with awareness, with presence, with the willingness to learn. But, and this is crucial, this doesn't mean being foolish or reckless. The second response is to honestly assess, am I actually ready for this challenge right now? Do I have the skills, the stability, the support to meet this skillfully? Sometimes the answer is yes. Face it now. Sometimes the answer is not yet. Step back, prepare, train, then return. The wisdom is in knowing the difference. If you're early in recovery from addiction and someone offers you drugs, don't flee doesn't mean you should stay in that situation to prove your strength. It means you face the reality of your situation clearly, acknowledge the pull you feel, and make the wise choice to remove yourself and seek support. If you're learning to meditate and your mind is extremely agitated, don't flee doesn't mean you force yourself to sit for 2 hours in misery. It means you stay present with the agitation for as long as you skillfully can. Learn from it, then step back and try again tomorrow. The Buddha faced his greatest challenge right before his awakening, and the way he met it demonstrates both responses perfectly. As he sat under the Bodhi tree, determined to achieve awakening, Mara appeared, the Buddhist representation of delusion, craving, fear, everything that keeps beings trapped in suffering. Mara brought armies of demons to attack the Buddha. He brought his beautiful daughters to seduce him. He challenged the Buddha's right to sit there, his worthiness to seek awakening. He whispered doubts. Who do you think you are? What makes you think you can succeed where so many have failed? Give up now and save yourself the embarrassment of failure. And what did the Buddha do? He didn't fight. He didn't argue with Mara or try to defeat him through force. He didn't flee from the fear and doubt that arose. He simply sat, unmoved, touching the earth with his right hand as a witness to his many lifetimes of preparation for this moment. This gesture, touching the earth, is so important. He wasn't claiming his own power or his own greatness. He was simply acknowledging reality. I have prepared for this. I have trained for this. The earth itself is my witness. This is the first response. Don't flee. He faced Mara directly, without running away, without trying to avoid the challenge. But notice, he could do this because he had prepared. He had been training for years, practicing meditation, living ethically, developing wisdom, cultivating the 5 spiritual faculties, including virya, effort. He had built his capacity through gradual training until he was ready for this ultimate challenge. This is the second response, honest assessment. He didn't face Mara on his first day of practice. He faced Mara when he was ready, when his preparation was complete, when his capacity matched the challenge. Before that night under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha had spent 6 years in intense practice. He had tried extreme asceticism, nearly starving himself to death. He had learned from the greatest meditation teachers of his time. He had explored every method available. Only after all this preparation did he sit under the tree with the determination, I will not rise from this spot until I have achieved awakening, or die in the attempt. This wasn't recklessness. This was readiness. This is the wisdom you need to develop, knowing when to engage and when to prepare more. And that preparation happens through 3 things the Buddha taught as the foundation of all progress: sila, samadhi, and panya, ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom. Sila comes first. You establish ethical conduct. You live by right action. You create stability in your life through wholesome choices. This gives you the solid ground to stand on. Then samadhi develops. Through meditation practice, through training your attention, through learning to steady your mind, you develop concentration. This gives you the ability to stay present with whatever arises, rather than being constantly scattered and reactive. And through sustained sila and samadhi, panya arises, wisdom, clear seeing, direct understanding of how things actually are. This gives you the ability to respond skillfully to any situation. These three support each other and build on each other. You can't skip steps. You can't develop deep concentration if your life is full of harmful actions that create guilt and instability. You can't develop genuine wisdom without the concentration to see clearly. This is the gradual training the Buddha taught. This is how you build the kind of strength that can face any challenge without fleeing and without being destroyed. Now, this might all sound very theoretical, very high level, but it comes down to very practical, very immediate actions every single day. The Buddha taught right effort, samma vayama, as one of the factors of the Eightfold Path. And right effort means 4 specific practices that you can apply right now, this morning, tomorrow morning, every morning of your life. First, the effort to prevent unwholesome states from arising. This means paying attention to conditions. If you know that scrolling social media first thing in the morning puts you in a negative state, don't do it. If you know that certain people or environments trigger unwholesome reactions in you, be mindful about when and how you engage with them. Second, the effort to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. This means not feeding them, not dwelling on them, not letting them take root. When anger arises, you don't suppress it, but you also don't indulge it by rehearsing your grievances over and over. You acknowledge it, you see it clearly, you let it pass. Third, the effort to cultivate wholesome states that haven't yet arisen. This means actively creating conditions for goodness. If you want to develop patience, you practice it in small moments throughout the day. If you want to develop generosity, you look for opportunities to give. Fourth, the effort to maintain and strengthen wholesome states that have already arisen. When you're feeling peaceful, you protect that peace. When kindness is present, you nurture it. You don't carelessly throw away the good states you've cultivated. This is right effort applied moment to moment. And one of the simplest, most powerful ways to practice it is in how you start each day. When your alarm goes off in the morning, what do? If you're like most people, you might hit snooze. You might lie there thinking you'll get up in just 5 more minutes. You might negotiate with yourself about whether you really need to get up right now. But here's what's actually happening in those moments. You're training yourself in a very specific way. You're training yourself that when you make an intention, you don't follow through. You're training yourself that your word to yourself doesn't mean anything. You're training yourself in weakness. Now think about the opposite. The alarm rings, and you get up immediately. Not because you want to, not because it feels good, but because you decided the night before that this is what you would do, and now you're doing it. This simple act, rising when you intended to rise, is a form of right effort. It's training in integrity, in following through on your intentions, in doing what you said you would do even when you don't feel like it. And this training accumulates. Each time you do what you intended to do, you strengthen that capacity. Each time you follow through despite resistance, you build trust with yourself. Each small act of discipline creates a foundation for larger acts of discipline. Think of it as building a muscle. The first time you lift a weight, it's difficult. But you do it again the next day, and again the day after that. Gradually, imperceptibly, the muscle grows stronger. What once required tremendous effort becomes easier. What once seemed impossible becomes routine. Getting up when you said you would is like that. Following through on your commitment to meditate is like that. Speaking truthfully when a lie would be easier is like that. Each small act strengthens the muscle of integrity, of discipline, of virya. This is why Buddhist practice emphasizes small, consistent actions rather than grand gestures. It's not about making dramatic vows you can't keep. It's about making small commitments and keeping them day after day until discipline becomes second nature. Getting up when you said you would, meditating for the amount of time you committed to, even when you don't feel like it. Speaking truthfully even when a small lie would be more convenient. Keeping a promise even when circumstances change. These small moments of mindfulness accumulate into a life lived with integrity. And a life lived with integrity is a life built on solid ground, unshakable ground. The Buddha taught that sila, ethical discipline, creates the conditions for peace. When you live by right action, when you practice right effort, when you train yourself daily in following through on your intentions, something happens inside you. The mind becomes quieter. The constant background anxiety of, what if someone finds out? Or, what if I get caught? Or, what if this comes back to haunt me? All of that fades away. You can sit in meditation with a clear conscience. You can look people in the eye without shame. You can sleep peacefully at night. This is the peace that comes from discipline. Not discipline as punishment, not discipline as restriction, but discipline as the gateway to freedom. Because here's the paradox that the Buddha understood. Real freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want, whenever you want. That's not freedom. That's slavery to impulse, to craving, to the constant push and pull of desire and aversion. Real freedom comes from training yourself so that you can choose your actions wisely rather than being driven by forces you don't understand and can't control. When you've trained in right effort, when you've developed virya, when you've built your life on the foundation of sila, you have real choice. You can meet difficulty without running away. You can face fear without being paralyzed by it. You can feel anger without acting on it destructively. You can experience craving without being controlled by it. This is the strength that needs no enemy, because it's not built in opposition to anything. It's built on alignment with how things actually are, on living in harmony with the Dharma, on developing the capacities that lead to the end of suffering. The Buddha taught that discipline isn't punishment, it's the gateway to freedom. And the way to walk through that gateway is one small step at a time, one moment of right effort at a time, one morning of getting up when you said you would at a time. This is how strength develops. This is how you become someone who can face challenges without fleeing. This is how you build the foundation for awakening itself. Not through dramatic gestures or heroic efforts, but through consistent, balanced, patient cultivation of wholesome qualities day after day after day, until one day you realize you're standing on unshakable ground. And from this ground, you can face anything that arises with clear awareness, with wisdom, with the strength that needs no enemy, because it was never built through opposition, but through understanding, through harmony, through living in alignment with the truth of how things are. This is what the Buddha discovered. This is what he taught for 45 years. And this is what remains available to anyone willing to walk the path, one step at a time, with balanced effort, with kindness toward themselves, with the patience to let strength develop naturally through gradual training. The path is here. The teaching is clear. The only question is, will you take that first small step tomorrow morning when your alarm rings? Most people hear the word discipline and feel a tightening in their chest. Rules, restrictions, someone telling you what you can't do. The mind immediately rebels. I want to be free. I don't want to be constrained by endless regulations. But the Buddha taught something that seems completely backwards to this instinct. Ethical discipline isn't restriction at all. It's protection. It's liberation. This is what sila means in the Buddhist tradition. Ethical conduct, moral discipline, the guidelines for action that create the foundation for everything else. And it's not what most people think it is. Sila isn't about following rules because someone in authority told you to. It's not about avoiding punishment or earning rewards in some future life. It's something much more immediate, much more practical. When you live by sila, you create protection for your own mind. Think about what happens when you lie to someone. In that moment, it might seem like the easy way out. Avoid confrontation, avoid consequences, avoid discomfort. But what happens afterwards? You have to remember what you said. You have to keep your story consistent. You have to worry about being found out. Every time you see that person, there's a subtle tension. Will they discover the truth? Will your lie unravel? This creates mental disturbance. It creates anxiety, guilt, fear. Even if you're not consciously aware of it, it's operating in the background, disturbing your peace. Now think about what happens when you speak truthfully, even when it's difficult. Yes, there might be immediate discomfort. The conversation might be harder. But afterwards, you're free. You have nothing to hide, nothing to track, nothing to manage. You can meet that person's eyes directly. You can sleep peacefully that night. Your mind is clear. This is what Sila provides: mental peace, mental clarity, mental freedom. The Buddha taught 5 basic precepts for lay practitioners, and each one creates this kind of protection. First, abstaining from killing or harming living beings. When you live by this precept, you're not carrying the weight of having caused suffering deliberately. Your mind is not disturbed by guilt or by the karmic consequences of taking life. Even small acts of harm create ripples in your mind. Killing an insect in anger, speaking words meant to hurt someone, acting with the intention to cause pain. Each of these creates a disturbance that affects your ability to find peace. Second, abstaining from taking what is not given. When you live by this precept, you can be around others' possessions without craving, without scheming, without the anxiety of having stolen something or the paranoia of being caught. This extends beyond obvious theft. It includes taking credit for others' work, using company resources inappropriately, even taking someone's time without permission. When you honor what belongs to others, your mind rests easy. Third, abstaining from sexual misconduct. When you live by this precept, your relationships are honest, your commitments are honored, you're not betraying anyone's trust or creating suffering through your desires. This means respecting boundaries, honoring commitments, not using others for your own gratification without regard for the harm it might cause. Sexual energy is powerful, and when it's expressed ethically, it doesn't create the complex web of guilt, betrayal, and suffering that sexual misconduct creates. Fourth, abstaining from false speech. When you live by this precept, as we already explored, your mind is free from the complex web that lies create. But this also includes harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle chatter, all forms of speech that create harm or waste the precious resource of communication. When your speech is truthful, kind, beneficial, and timely, you create connection rather than division. Fifth, abstaining from intoxicants that cloud the mind. When you live by this precept, you maintain clarity, you remain present, you don't escape into states that create later regret or harm. This isn't about being rigid or joyless. It's about recognizing that intoxication creates heedlessness, and in that heedless state, you're much more likely to break the other precepts. You're more likely to harm, to take what's not given, to engage in sexual misconduct, to speak falsely. These aren't arbitrary rules handed down by authority. They're observable truths about what creates suffering and what creates peace. Try it for yourself. Live by even one of these precepts carefully for a week. Just one. Notice what happens in your mind. Notice the quality of your peace, your sleep, your ease around others. This is why monastics follow the Vinaya, the monastic code with its hundreds of detailed rules. Not because they're trying to be perfect or holier than others, but because they understand that external structure supports internal development. When you don't have to make 1,000 small decisions every day about what's okay and what's not, you free up tremendous mental energy. You don't have to negotiate with yourself constantly. The structure is already there, and within that structure, you can go deep. Think about it this way. If you're trying to meditate but you're constantly debating whether you should check your phone, whether you should eat now or later, whether you should speak or stay silent, whether this action or that action is appropriate, all that mental negotiation is exhausting. But when the structure is clear, when the boundaries are established, you can relax into them. The phone stays off during meditation hours. Meals happen at set times. Speech follows certain guidelines. Action has clear parameters. This isn't restriction. This is simplification. This is creating conditions where the mind can settle, can go deep, can develop concentration and wisdom. Now, not everyone needs to ordain as a monk or nun. The Buddha was very clear about this. In fact, most people shouldn't ordain. Monastic life is meant for those with a very specific calling. But everyone can practice sila. Everyone can bring the principles of ethical conduct into their daily life, whatever that life looks like. The Buddha gave extensive teachings to lay practitioners, people with families, jobs, businesses, all the complexities of worldly life. He didn't tell them they had to renounce everything and enter a monastery. He showed them how to practice right where they were. In the Sigalovada Sutta, the Buddha spoke to a young man named Sigala about how to live ethically as a householder. He talked about duties to parents, to teachers, to spouse, to children, to friends, to employees, to spiritual guides. He showed how ethical conduct extends into every relationship, every responsibility, every area of life. The teaching wasn't, leave all of this behind. The teaching was, engage with all of this skillfully, with awareness, with ethical integrity. This is what lay practice of sila looks like, taking the 5 precepts as your personal refuge, your guide for action in the midst of a complex life. It means structuring your 24 hours with intention, sammasankappa, right intention, knowing why you're doing what you're doing. Not just drifting through the day on autopilot, reacting to whatever comes up, but living with deliberate awareness of your actions and their consequences. For example, you might look at your day and see, I wake up, I immediately check my phone, I scroll through news and social media for 30 minutes, I rush to get ready, I skip breakfast, I'm irritated with traffic, I arrive at work, already depleted. This is a day structured unconsciously by habit and reaction. Now imagine structuring the same hours with intention. I wake up, I take 3 conscious breaths before getting out of bed. I meditate for 10 minutes. I eat a simple breakfast mindfully. I drive to work with awareness of my mental state. I arrive ready to engage. Same 24 hours. Completely different quality of experience. This is what Sila as a lay practitioner means, bringing deliberate structure and ethical awareness into ordinary life. It means small, consistent practice rather than dramatic, but sporadic efforts. Many people get inspired and make huge commitments. Starting Monday, I'm going to meditate 2 hours a day, follow all the precepts perfectly, and transform my entire life. Monday comes. They meditate for 2 hours, and it's painful and boring. They try to follow the precepts perfectly and fail by noon. By Wednesday, they've given up completely. This isn't how the Buddha taught practice to develop. The Buddha taught Anupubikatha, gradual training, step by step, layer by layer. You start where you are. Maybe you can't follow all 5 precepts perfectly right now, so you start with 1. You commit to complete honesty in your speech for 1 week. You watch how often the impulse to lie arises. You watch what happens when you choose truth instead. You notice the difference in your mind. After a week, maybe you continue with that precept and add another, or maybe you need another week with just truthful speech to really establish it. This is patient, sustainable practice. This is how Sila actually becomes established in your life rather than remaining just a beautiful idea. Maybe you can't meditate for an hour, but you can sit for 5 minutes every morning. You do that for a month, and 5 minutes becomes natural, almost automatic. Then maybe you extend to 10 minutes. The key is consistency, not heroic effort. It's better to practice 5 minutes every single day than to practice 3 hours once a month. The daily repetition creates grooves in your mind, establishes patterns, builds capacity that lasts. Think of it like watering a garden. If you dump a huge amount of water on your plants once a month, most of it runs off, the soil can't absorb it, and the plants suffer between waterings. But if you water a little bit every day, the soil stays moist, the roots grow deep, the plants thrive. Your practice is like this: small amounts of water, small amounts of practice, given consistently every day, create conditions for growth that dramatic but sporadic efforts never can. Small, consistent steps build a foundation that lasts. Dramatic gestures might feel impressive in the moment, but they rarely sustain. The Buddha said in the Sigalovada Sutta, by undertaking and observing these 6 directions, the lay follower makes both worlds peaceful, and after death, they are reborn in a good destination. The 6 directions he referred to are the different relationships and responsibilities of life: parents, teachers, spouse, children, friends, and spiritual guides. By fulfilling these with ethical integrity, both this life and whatever comes after become peaceful. This is the practical result of Sila: peace, here and now, not someday in a distant future, but in the quality of your daily experience. Now, Here's something crucial that many practitioners miss. You have to test your practice against reality. It's very easy to have beautiful aspirations. I'm going to be completely honest, completely kind, completely ethical in all situations. But aspiration alone isn't practice. Practice is what happens when aspiration meets actual circumstances. Are you actually being honest when it costs you something? Are you actually kind when someone is irritating you? Are you actually following the precepts when it would be much easier not to? This requires honest self-assessment. And honest self-assessment is hard because the ego is incredibly skilled at self-deception. You might think you're very peaceful and patient, but then someone cuts you off in traffic and you're immediately enraged. You might think you're very honest, but then you realize you've been deceiving yourself about your motivations for months. You might believe you're practicing non-harm, but then you notice how often your words cause pain to others, even if you didn't intend harm. The gap between who we think we are and who we actually are in lived experience, this gap is where real practice happens. There's a danger in spiritual practice that the Buddha warned about, claiming attainments you haven't actually achieved, fooling yourself into thinking you're more developed than you are. This is sometimes called spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid dealing with real psychological and behavioral issues. Someone might say, I'm practicing non-attachment, so it doesn't matter that I never commit to anything or anyone. But that's not non-attachment. That's avoidance. That's fear of intimacy. That's using spiritual language to justify harmful patterns. Or someone might say, I'm practicing acceptance, so I accept my anger and I don't need to work on it. But acceptance doesn't mean passive resignation to unwholesome states. It means seeing clearly what is, and then applying right effort to cultivate what's wholesome and abandon what's not. The Buddha was very direct about this danger. He said that falsely claiming spiritual attainments is one of the gravest errors a practitioner can make. Why? Because it stops real progress dead in its tracks. If you believe you've already arrived, you stop traveling. If you think you're enlightened when you're not, you stop practicing what would actually lead to enlightenment. You settle into a comfortable delusion and call it awakening. This is why the Buddha taught balancing faith with wisdom. Faith, saddha, is important. You need confidence in the path, trust in the teachings, inspiration to practice. Without faith, you won't make the effort required. But faith alone, without wisdom, panya, becomes blind belief. It becomes believing things about yourself or your practice that aren't actually true. Wisdom tests faith against reality. Wisdom asks, does this practice actually reduce my suffering? Am I actually less reactive, less caught in craving and aversion? Are my relationships actually improving? Is my mind actually more peaceful? These are the real tests of practice. Not how many hours you sit in meditation, not how much spiritual vocabulary you've learned, not how many teachings you've heard. But is your daily life actually different? Is there actually less suffering? If you've been practicing for years but you're still as angry, as anxious, as selfish, as caught in harmful patterns as you were when you started, then something isn't working. That's not a failure. That's information. It's wisdom telling you that you need to look more closely, practice differently, or perhaps seek guidance. The Buddha taught that ethical conduct should be visible in your life. People around you should notice something different, even if they can't name what it is. If you're practicing the precepts, but everyone you know still finds you dishonest, still sees you harming others, still watches you get intoxicated and act carelessly, then you're not actually practicing sila, you're just thinking about it. This sounds harsh, but it's actually compassionate, because only honest assessment creates the possibility of real change. The question to keep asking yourself is, does my practice reduce suffering, my own suffering, and the suffering I cause others? If yes, continue. If no, investigate why. Maybe you're practicing but not consistently enough for it to take root. Maybe you're practicing with too much force and creating more tension than release. Maybe you're practicing the form but missing the essence, following rules externally but not developing internal understanding. This honest questioning, this willingness to see yourself clearly without the comfortable delusions, this is wisdom balancing faith. And when you practice this way, when you commit to sila, not as rules to be obeyed, but as protection for your mind, when you practice gradually and consistently, when you test your practice against reality honestly, something remarkable begins to happen. Sila becomes natural. At first, following the precepts requires effort, deliberation, constant mindfulness. You have to remind yourself, don't lie, don't take what's not given, don't harm. It feels like walking a tightrope, constantly vigilant, always one small lapse away from falling. But gradually, with patient practice, something shifts. The restraint that once felt forced begins to feel natural. The ethical action that once required deliberation begins to arise spontaneously. You reach a point where you don't have to debate with yourself about whether to lie in a difficult situation. The truth simply comes out of your mouth, because that's who you've become. You don't have to force yourself not to take something that isn't yours. The impulse to take what's not given simply doesn't arise with any strength, because it's contrary to your established nature. This is what the Buddha called spontaneous virtue, wholesome action arising naturally from a mind that has been trained, that has been established in sila so thoroughly that it no longer needs to deliberate about basic ethical choices. Think of it like learning to drive. At first, you have to think about everything. Where are your hands? How much pressure on the pedals? Checking mirrors, signaling, turning. It's exhausting, overwhelming. But after months of practice, You drive without conscious deliberation. Your hands turn the wheel. Your feet work the pedals. You check mirrors and signal. All of it happens naturally, while your conscious mind is listening to music or having a conversation. Sila becomes like this. The ethical action that once required tremendous conscious effort becomes your default mode of operation. This doesn't mean you never face ethical dilemmas or difficult choices. Complex situations still require wisdom, discernment, careful consideration. But the basic foundation is stable. You're not constantly negotiating with yourself about whether to harm or not harm, to lie or speak truth, to honor commitments or break them. That negotiation is over. The foundation is established. And from that foundation, deeper practice can develop. The Buddha taught that when Sila is established, concentration develops naturally. When you're not carrying guilt, anxiety, fear, remorse about your actions, the mind has much less agitation. When you sit to meditate with a clear conscience, the mind settles more easily. There's less to work through, less disturbance in the background. And when concentration develops, wisdom has the conditions it needs to arise. You can see more clearly because you're not looking through the fog of mental disturbance created by unethical actions. This is the progression the Buddha taught. Sila, then samadhi, then panya, ethical conduct, then concentration, then wisdom. Each supports the next. Each creates conditions for the next to develop. You can't skip steps, but you also don't have to perfect one before starting the next. They develop together, supporting each other, gradually strengthening like three strands woven into a rope. And what holds all three together, what weaves them into something unbreakable, is something the Buddha taught about, but that most people overlook until they've been practicing for a long time. It's not more rules, not more effort, not more striving. It's equanimity, upekkha, the balanced mind that can meet whatever arises without being thrown by it. When Sila becomes natural, when you're no longer constantly managing the consequences of unethical actions, when your conscience is clear and your mind is settling into concentration, this creates space for something deeper to develop. A quality of steadiness, of balance, of being unshaken by the constant ups and downs of life. This is where discipline leads, if you follow it all the way through, not to rigid control or harsh restraint, but to a kind of inner freedom that doesn't need external circumstances to be a certain way in order to be at peace. But discipline creates something even deeper, equanimity, a peace so stable that nothing in this changing world can shake it. There's a quality the Buddha taught about that most people only discover after years of practice. It's not something you aim for directly in the beginning. It's more like something that emerges naturally when the conditions are right, like flowers blooming when spring finally comes. The Buddha called it upekkha, equanimity, the fourth of the Brahma Viharas, the sublime attitudes. The first three sublime attitudes are easier to understand: loving, kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy. We know what it means to wish others well, to feel for those who suffer, to rejoice in others' happiness. But equanimity is more subtle, more easily misunderstood. Many people think equanimity means indifference, not caring what happens, being cold, detached, unmoved by the suffering of the world. But this isn't what the Buddha taught at all. Equanimity is not indifference. It's balanced concern. It's caring deeply about all beings while remaining stable in the face of the 8 worldly winds that constantly blow through every human life. The 8 worldly winds. The Buddha taught about these in the Lokavipatti Sutta. They come in 4 pairs and they never stop blowing. Praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, pleasure and pain. These 8 conditions are constantly arising in everyone's life. Sometimes you're praised, sometimes you're blamed. Sometimes you gain something, sometimes you lose it. Sometimes your reputation rises, sometimes it falls. Sometimes you experience pleasure, sometimes pain. The untrained mind is blown around by these winds like a leaf in a storm. Someone praises you, and immediately you feel elated, special, validated. You want more praise. You start performing for it, shaping yourself to get it, becoming addicted to that feeling. Then someone blames you, criticizes you, points out your flaws, and immediately you crash. You feel hurt, angry, defensive. You either attack back or withdraw into yourself, nursing your wounds. This is being blown by the winds. This is having no stability, no center, no ground beneath your feet. You gain something: money, status, a relationship, an opportunity, and you're flying high. Life is wonderful. Everything is working out. Then you lose something. The money disappears. The status drops. The relationship ends. The opportunity falls through, and you're devastated. Life is terrible. Nothing ever works out for you. Up and down, blown by every breeze, tossed by every gust. The Buddha said in the Lokavipatti Sutta, these 8 worldly conditions spin after the world, and the world spins after these 8 worldly conditions: gain and loss, disrepute and fame, praise and censure, pleasure and pain. But then he described the person who has developed equanimity. These 8 worldly conditions do not spin after a noble disciple, nor does a noble disciple spin after these 8 worldly conditions. This is what equanimity looks like in practice. The winds still blow, praise still comes, blame still comes, gain and loss still happen, but you're not blown around by them anymore. You remain stable, grounded, centered. Someone praises you, and you can receive it without inflating. Thank you, you might say, and mean it, but you're not identified with the praise. You don't need it to feel worthy. It doesn't make you more than you were a moment before. Someone blames you, and you can hear it without collapsing. If the criticism is valid, you can learn from it without being destroyed by shame. If it's not valid, you can let it pass without needing to defend yourself aggressively. This is equanimity. Not that you don't feel anything, but that you're not thrown off center by what you feel. You gain something, and you can enjoy it without clinging. You appreciate it while it's here, but you're not building your entire sense of security on it. You lose something, and you can grieve it without being destroyed. You feel the loss, you acknowledge the pain, but you're not shattered because you never believed the thing you lost was permanent in the first place. This quality, this unshakable stability in the midst of constant change, this is the crown of the sublime attitudes. But here's what's important to understand. You can't think your way to equanimity. You can understand the concept intellectually. You can memorize the 8 worldly winds. You can tell yourself, I should be more equanimous. But none of that creates actual equanimity. Equanimity is not a belief. It's a capacity, a quality of mind that must be trained through practice. The Buddha taught specific methods for developing equanimity, and they all involve direct observation of your actual experience. You sit in meditation, and you watch. You watch your mind. You watch your body. You watch sensations arising and passing. A pleasant sensation arises, maybe a feeling of peace or comfort or a moment of joy. What does the mind do? It tilts toward the pleasant sensation. It wants to keep it, to hold on to it, to make it last forever. You notice this tilt. You observe it without judgment. The mind is leaning toward pleasure. An unpleasant sensation arises, maybe discomfort in your knee, or an itch, or a difficult emotion. What does the mind do? It tilts away from the unpleasant sensation. It wants to push it away, to make it stop, to escape from it. You notice this tilt. You observe it without judgment. The mind is leaning away from pain. And then, and this is the training, you gently bring the mind back to center. Not forcing, not straining, just returning to balance. You return to the breath, the simple, rising and falling that's always available, always neutral, always here. This is how equanimity develops, through thousands of small moments of noticing the mind tilting and gently returning to center. It's like training your physical balance. If you want to be able to stand on one leg steadily, you have to practice standing on one leg. At first, you wobble constantly, your body tilting this way and that, trying to find center. But you keep practicing. You keep noticing. When you start to fall, and making small adjustments to stay upright. Over time, the wobbling decreases. Your body learns where center is. Eventually, you can stand on one leg steadily, even with your eyes closed. Mental equanimity develops the same way. You practice noticing when your mind is blown by the winds, and you practice returning to center over and over and over. The Buddha taught that breath meditation, anapanasati, is one of the most powerful tools for developing equanimity. Why the breath? Because the breath is always here, always neutral, always available, as an anchor. The breath doesn't praise you or blame you. It doesn't give you gain or loss. It just flows in and flows out, naturally, without effort, moment after moment. When you train your attention to rest on the breath, you're training instability. You're practicing not being blown around by every passing thought, every sensation, every emotion. The breath becomes your reference point for center. When you notice you've been carried away by thoughts about praise someone gave you yesterday, you return to the breath. When you notice you're spinning in anxiety about something you might lose, you return to the breath. The breath is always center, not the high of pleasure, not the low of pain, just this simple, neutral, continuous process that keeps you alive without you having to do anything at all. And as you practice this, returning to the breath, returning to center, something begins to change in how you meet the rest of life. You start to notice in daily life when you're being blown by the winds. You catch yourself getting inflated by praise, and you can take a breath and return to center. You catch yourself spiraling into despair over a loss, and you can take a breath and return to center. This is the middle way applied moment by moment, not avoiding pleasure or seeking pain, but not being controlled by either, meeting both with the same quality of steady awareness. Now, underlying all of this training in equanimity is a deep understanding of something the Buddha emphasized again and again: anicca, impermanence. This is not just a philosophical concept. It's an observable truth about every single thing that exists. All conditioned things are impermanent. The Buddha said this so clearly: Sabbe sankhara anicca. Every condition, every formation, every constructed thing arises and passes away. Success arises and passes away. You work hard. You achieve something. You have a moment of success, and then it's gone, replaced by the next challenge, the next goal, the next situation. Health arises and passes away. You feel strong and vital. Your body works beautifully. And then you get sick, or injured, or simply age, and that health you took for granted is gone. Wealth arises and passes away. You accumulate money, possessions, resources, and then the market crashes, or expenses arise, or you die, and it all goes to someone else. Relationships arise and pass away. You fall in love. You build a friendship, You create a family, and then people change, or move away, or die, and what you had is gone. This isn't pessimism. This isn't saying nothing matters or nothing is worth having. This is just observing reality clearly. Everything that arises will pass away. Everything that comes together will come apart. Everything that's born will die. This is not bad news. This is just news. This is just how things are. The question is, can you walk through this constant change without suffering? Can you enjoy success while it's here without clinging to it desperately, without building your entire identity on it, without falling apart when it inevitably changes? Can you appreciate health while you have it, without taking it for granted, without believing it will last forever, without being blindsided when it shifts? Can you love people deeply while understanding that everything changes, that nothing stays the same, that loss is built into the very nature of having? This is what equanimity makes possible. Not that you stop caring or stop feeling, but that you care and feel without being destroyed by the inevitable changes that come. Equanimity isn't avoiding the waves. Life is waves, constant ups and downs, constant changes, constant arising and passing away. Equanimity is learning not to drown. When a wave of success comes, you can ride it without clinging to it desperately. You know it's a wave, that it arose from conditions, that it will pass when those conditions change. So you enjoy the ride without building your house on the wave. When a wave of loss comes, you can move through it without being pulled under. You know it's a wave, that it too arose from conditions, that it too will pass. So you feel the grief or disappointment or pain without believing it will last forever. The Buddha used the metaphor of the ocean. On the surface, there are always waves, sometimes huge storms, sometimes gentle swells, but always movement, always change. But deep in the ocean, below the surface turbulence, there's stillness. The waves on the surface don't disturb the depths. Equanimity is like finding that depth in yourself. The surface of your life still has waves. Of course it does. But you're not only the surface, you're also the depth, the stillness that the waves can't reach. This understanding, this deep recognition of impermanence, changes everything about how you hold your achievements. When you accomplish something, when you reach a goal you've been working toward for years, when you finally get what you've been wanting, equanimity allows you to appreciate it fully without grasping. You can feel the joy, the satisfaction, the sense of completion. But underneath that feeling, there's a knowing, this too is impermanent. This too arose from conditions and will change when conditions change. This knowing doesn't diminish the joy. If anything, it makes it richer, more poignant, more precious. Because you know it's temporary, you pay attention. You're fully present for it. You don't waste it by taking it for granted. And then, when conditions change, as they always do, when the achievement becomes old news, when the next challenge arises, when what you accomplished yesterday is no longer relevant today, you can let it go without suffering. Not because it didn't matter, but because you always knew it was a wave, and waves pass, and that's okay. The same is true for losses. When you lose something, a job, a relationship, your health, a loved one, equanimity doesn't make the loss hurt less. But it allows you to move through the hurt without being destroyed by it. You feel the grief fully. You honor what was lost. You give yourself time and space to heal. But underneath the grief, there's a knowing. This too is impermanent. This pain arose from conditions and will change when conditions change. Loss is real, but it's not the end of everything. This is why the Buddha taught that understanding impermanence is essential. Not so you become cold, or detached, or uncaring, but so you can engage fully with life without being constantly thrown by its changes. When you deeply understand that everything changes, you stop expecting things to stay the same. You stop being shocked and devastated every time something ends, or transforms, or disappears. You know this is how life works. Arising and passing, appearing and disappearing, coming together and coming apart. This is the nature of all conditioned things. And in that understanding, there's a profound freedom. You're not fighting reality anymore. You're not demanding that things be different than they are. You're not spending your energy trying to make the impermanent permanent, trying to stop waves from being waves. Instead, you're living in harmony with how things actually are. You're meeting each moment as it comes, each change as it arises, with steady awareness and a balanced heart. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop caring about outcomes. You still work hard, you still set goals, you still try to create good things in your life and in the world. But you do it all from a place of stability rather than desperation. You act wisely and skillfully, but you're not attached to controlling outcomes that can never be fully controlled. You plant seeds, you water them, you tend the garden, but you know you're not in control of whether the seeds sprout, how the weather will be, what the harvest will bring. You do your part, and then you meet whatever arises with equanimity. This is the wisdom the Buddha taught, that you can have preferences without being enslaved by them, that you can work toward goals without being destroyed when things don't go as planned, that you can love deeply without being shattered by inevitable loss. Equanimity is the quality that makes all of this possible. It's the unshakable center that remains steady while everything else changes. It's what allows you to hear praise and blame with the same steady awareness, not puffing up with the praise, not collapsing with the blame, just hearing both as passing sounds, like wind moving through trees. It's what allows you to experience gain and loss with the same balanced heart, not clinging desperately to what you have, not falling apart when it goes, just recognizing both as part of the natural flow of things. It's what allows you to move through fame and disrepute with the same inner stability, not building your identity on what others think of you, whether they're praising you or disparaging you. It's what allows you to feel pleasure and pain with the same clear awareness, not chasing after every pleasure, not running from every pain, just experiencing both as sensations that arise and pass like everything else. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed to, not freedom from feeling or caring, but freedom from being blown around by every passing condition, every change, every up and down of ordinary human life. And it's available to anyone willing to train, through meditation, through observing impermanence, through patient practice of returning to center again and again and again, until one day you realize the winds are still blowing, the waves are still moving, life is still changing constantly, but you're not being thrown anymore. You've found your center. You've developed the capacity to remain stable no matter what arises. You've learned to stand steady while everything changes. There's a teaching at the very heart of Buddhism that most people find deeply unsettling when they first encounter it. Not because it's complicated, but because it challenges something so fundamental that we rarely question it. The belief that there is a solid, permanent I at the center of our experience. This teaching is called anatta, non-self. And the Buddha said that understanding this teaching is essential to the end of suffering. Now, when people first hear non-self, they often think it means you don't exist at all. They imagine it's some kind of nihilistic philosophy that says nothing is real, nothing matters, you're just an illusion. But that's not what the Buddha taught. That's not what anatta means. The Buddha was very practical, very precise. He didn't deal in abstract philosophy for its own sake. He taught things that directly address suffering and its end. So when he taught about non-self, he taught it in a very specific way. He asked, "Where is this self you believe in? Can you find it?" In the Anattalakkhana Sutta, one of the Buddha's most important teachings, he broke down human experience into 5 components, the 5 aggregates, or khandhas. First, there's form, rupa. This is your physical body, matter, the stuff you're made of. Second, there's feeling, vedana, the basic quality of experience as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Third, there's perception, sanya, recognition, the ability to identify and label what you're experiencing. Fourth, there are mental formations, sankhara, thoughts, emotions, intentions, all the activity of mind. Fifth, there's consciousness, vijnana, the basic awareness, that allows you to know anything at all. The Buddha said, "Look at each of these carefully. Is any one of them you? Take the body. Is the body you?" It seems like a reasonable answer at first. But look closer. The body is constantly changing. Cells are dying and being born every moment. The body you had 10 years ago is mostly gone, replaced by different matter. Which body is you? The one from childhood? The one right now? The one you'll have in 20 years? And can you control the body completely? Can you tell your body not to age? Not to get sick? Not to die? The Buddha said, if the body were truly self, it would not lead to affliction, and you would be able to command it, "Let my body be thus. Let my body not be thus." But you can't. The body follows its own nature, subject to conditions beyond your control. So the body is not self. It's more accurate to say the body is a process, a temporary configuration of matter that's constantly changing, that arose from conditions and will dissolve when those conditions change. Okay, so maybe you're not the body. Maybe you're your feelings. But feelings are even more obviously impermanent. They arise and pass away constantly. Pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, neutral feeling, they come and go like weather. Which feeling is you? The happiness you felt this morning, the irritation you felt an hour ago, the peace you're feeling right now? All of these feelings arise based on conditions. What you ate, how you slept, what someone said, what thought passed through your mind. They come, they stay briefly, they go. If feeling were self, you could control it completely. You could decide to be happy and stay happy forever. But you can't. Feelings arise and pass based on conditions. The same is true for perception, for mental formations, for consciousness itself. Each aggregate arises based on conditions, changes constantly, and cannot be controlled absolutely. The Buddha said clearly in the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, form is not self. If form were self, form would not lead to affliction, and it would be possible regarding form. Let my form be thus. Let my form not be thus. But because form is not self, form leads to affliction, and it is not possible regarding form. Let my form be thus. Let my form not be thus. And he said the same about each of the other 4 aggregates. So if none of the 5 aggregates are self, where is the self? This is the question the Buddha wanted you to investigate directly in your own experience. Not to believe blindly, not to accept as philosophy, but to look carefully and see for yourself. When you say, "I am successful," what is that I? Is it the body that went to work? Is it the feelings of satisfaction? Is it the perception of success? Is it the thoughts about achievement? Is it consciousness aware of all of this? All of these things are present in the experience of success. But which one is the I that is successful? And here's where the suffering comes in. When you identify with success, when you believe, "I am successful," what happens when the success fades. Because it will fade. Success is a condition, and all conditions are impermanent. The success that exists today arose from certain conditions: hard work, opportunity, timing, countless factors. When those conditions change, the success changes or disappears. If you've built your sense of self on that success, if you believe, "I am successful," at a deep level, then when the success fades, what happens to the I? It feels like you're disappearing, like you're losing yourself, like you're becoming nothing. This creates tremendous suffering. But if you understand that success is just a temporary condition that arose and will pass, if you understand that it's not who you are, but something you temporarily experienced, then, when it changes, you're still here. There's sadness maybe, or disappointment, but not the existential crisis of self-dissolution. This is what the Buddha meant by non-self. Not that you don't exist, but that what you are is not what you think you are. You're not a solid, permanent, independent self that possesses experiences. You're more like a process, a flow, an ever-changing pattern of conditions arising and passing away. And this understanding, this is liberation. Because when you stop identifying with what changes, when you stop clinging to temporary conditions as if they define you, you stop creating the suffering that comes from loss. This teaching isn't nihilism. It's not saying nothing matters or you should stop caring about your life. It's offering freedom from a false refuge. The false refuge of believing that if you can just achieve enough, acquire enough, become enough, you'll finally feel solid and secure and permanent. That's the trap. Spending your whole life trying to build a permanent self out of impermanent conditions. It can't be done. It's like trying to build a house on waves. But here's the subtle part that many people miss. There is a conventional self that functions perfectly well. You have a name, a body, a personality, a history, relationships, responsibilities. All of this exists conventionally. It's useful, necessary even, for functioning in the world. The Buddha never said to deny or destroy the conventional self. He used his own name. He had disciples who knew him as a person. He ate and slept and taught. What he said was, "Don't mistake the conventional self for an ultimate, unchanging reality. Don't cling to it as if it were solid and permanent." Think of it like this. In a movie, there are characters. The characters have names, personalities, relationships. They seem real within the movie. But they're actually just patterns of light on a screen, pixels arranged in a certain way. The conventional self is like the character. The ultimate reality is more like the pixels, just conditions arising and passing, no solid entity there. But you don't need to stop enjoying the movie. You can engage with the story, care about the characters, follow the plot. You just don't forget that it's a movie. This is skillful engagement without clinging, living fully, caring deeply, but not grasping at a solid self that doesn't actually exist. When wealth comes, you can appreciate it and use it wisely. But if you understand that wealth is just a condition arising from other conditions, you don't think, I am wealth. So when the wealth leaves, as it inevitably will, suffering only arises if you believed, I am wealth. If you never made that identification, then the loss is just a change in conditions, not a threat to your very existence. Think about someone who trains their body intensely, an athlete, a dancer, someone whose physical abilities are central to their life. They might identify strongly with their body's capabilities. I am strong. I am flexible. I am fast. Then the body ages. Inevitably, it ages. The strength decreases. The flexibility reduces. The speed slows. If they deeply believe, I am my physical abilities, this aging becomes not just a change, but an existential crisis. Who am I if I can no longer do what I could do? But if they understand that the body is just one aggregate, just a temporary condition, just a process that's always changing, then the aging is sad perhaps. There's loss and grief, but there's no existential collapse. Because the I they thought was, the body never was the body in the first place. It was a misidentification, a case of mistaken identity. This understanding allows for something remarkable. You can engage fully with life, develop skills, create things, love people, work hard, all of it, without clinging to any of it as if it defines your ultimate nature. The Buddha taught right livelihood and right action as part of the Eightfold Path. He encouraged full participation in life, ethical conduct, skillful work, contributing to the welfare of others. None of this requires believing in a permanent self. In fact, it's easier to do when you're not burdened by self-clinging. You can express kindness without needing to be a kind person. You can work skillfully without needing to be a successful person. You can create beautiful things without needing to be a creative person. You just do it. Kindness arises, so you express it. Skill develops, so you use it. Creativity flows, so you create. No claim of ownership, no grasping at identity, just appropriate response to conditions. In Zen Buddhism, there's an aspiration that comes from this understanding, the bodhisattva, aspiration to work for the liberation of all beings. But notice, it's not, I will save all beings. It's more like, liberation happens, and it can happen through this body, mind, through these conditions, for the benefit of others. Responsible action without, I am the doer. This might sound abstract, but it shows up in very practical ways. When you do something helpful, and don't need credit for it. That's non-self in action. When you fail at something and don't collapse into, I am a failure, that's non-self protecting you from unnecessary suffering. When you can hold your achievements lightly, appreciating them without building your identity on them, that's wisdom about non-self. When you can receive criticism without feeling like your entire existence is threatened, that's freedom from self-clinging. The Buddha taught this not as a metaphysical theory to believe in, but as something to investigate, to test, to understand through direct experience. Try looking for the self right now. Is it in your body, your feelings, your thoughts, your awareness? Or is there just a process happening, breathing, sensing, thinking, knowing, with no separate I that owns it all? This investigation isn't meant to make you feel like you're disappearing or becoming nothing. It's meant to free you from the exhausting project of trying to construct and maintain a solid self out of conditions that are always changing. You can relax. You don't have to hold yourself together. You were never separate in the first place. You're part of the flow of life, not separate from it. Conditions arising and passing moment by moment, with no need for a permanent I to make it all mean something. The meaning is in the living itself, in responding skillfully to what arises, in reducing suffering where you can, in expressing wisdom and compassion through these temporary conditions called your body and mind. This is what the Buddha discovered and taught, that the end of suffering comes not from building up the self, not from making it bigger or better or more permanent, but from seeing through the illusion of self entirely. And in that seeing, there's profound peace, because you're no longer trying to protect something that was never there in the first place. You're no longer afraid of losing what you never really had. There's just this moment, these conditions, this opportunity to respond with wisdom and care. No solid self to defend, no permanent identity to maintain, no I that needs the world to be a certain way in order to survive. Just life living itself through this particular form, for however long these conditions persist. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed to. And as we approach the end of our journey together, this teaching about non-self becomes the foundation for understanding what the Buddha taught about how to actually live, not in theory, but in practice, moment by moment, with intention and awareness. Because if there's no solid self to protect, what is there to do? How do you live when you've seen through the illusion that held you captive for so long? The Buddha's final teaching awaits, not about what you are, but about what you do with this precious human life, this brief opportunity to wake up and respond skillfully to whatever arises. If you've been following this journey through the Buddha's teachings, you've seen how ethical conduct creates stability, how effort needs balance, how equanimity emerges from practice, how the self you protect isn't what you think it is. But now comes the question that matters most. With all this understanding, how do you actually live? The Buddha taught that everything begins with intention, samma sankappa, in the ancient language, right intention, the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. This comes right after right view, and that's not accidental. First, you see clearly. You understand suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path. Then, based on that clear seeing, you form intentions about how to live. But intention in Buddhism isn't just having good wishes or making plans. It's much more fundamental than that. Intention is what shapes the quality of every single action you take. It's what lies beneath your words, your choices, your responses to life. It's the difference between two people doing the exact same action with completely different results. The Buddha taught 3 specific intentions that should guide a practitioner's life. The first is the intention of renunciation, nekkhamma. Now, this word can sound harsh or extreme, like you're supposed to give up everything and live in a cave. But renunciation here means something more subtle. It means the intention to let go, to not grasp, to turn away from what creates suffering. Every day you're faced with choices. Pursue this pleasure or let it go. Cling to this possession or hold it lightly. Chase this desire or recognize it and release it. The intention of renunciation guides you toward letting go rather than grasping. This doesn't mean you can't enjoy things or have things. It means you check the quality of your holding. Are you grasping desperately or appreciating lightly? That difference is everything. The second intention is goodwill, abhyapada, which literally means non-ill will. It's the intention to wish others well, to want their happiness, to meet others with kindness rather than hostility. This intention operates even in difficult moments. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and there's a split second before you react. In that split second, what's your intention? To curse them, to wish them harm, to carry irritation, or to recognize they're human, probably stressed, definitely not trying to ruin your day. The intention of goodwill doesn't mean you never feel anger or frustration. It means that underneath those passing feelings, there's a deeper intention not to harm, not to wish suffering on others. The third intention is harmlessness, avihimsa. This is the positive expression of the first precept about not killing. It's the intention to move through life, causing as little harm as possible, protecting rather than destroying, healing rather than wounding. This intention extends to all beings, not just people you like or find easy to be around. It means checking your actions, your words, even your thoughts, for their potential to cause harm. Now, here's what makes these intentions so powerful. They shape everything, even when you're not consciously thinking about them. When these three intentions are established in your mind through practice, they become like an underlying current that moves all your actions in a wholesome direction. But you have to investigate your intentions, especially at the beginning. The mind is skilled at hiding real motivations behind acceptable-sounding justifications. You might think you're acting from kindness when you're actually trying to be liked. You might think you're being honest when you're actually trying to hurt someone with truth as a weapon. You might think you're helping when you're actually trying to control. The Buddha taught this in the Dvedavitaka Sutta, where he divided thoughts into two kinds: those connected with sensual desire, ill will, and harmfulness, and those connected with renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. He said, "Whatever a person frequently thinks about and ponders, that becomes the inclination of the mind." This is crucial to understand. Your intentions aren't just isolated moments of choice. They're creating grooves in your mind, establishing patterns that become stronger with repetition. Every time you act from the intention to grasp rather than release, you strengthen grasping. Every time you act from the intention to harm rather than heal, you strengthen harmfulness. But equally, every time you act from the intention of renunciation, you strengthen letting go. Every time you act from goodwill, you strengthen kindness. Every time you act from harmlessness, you strengthen compassion. So the question becomes, what are you strengthening in yourself through your daily intentions? And here's where understanding paticca samuppada, dependent origination, becomes essential. This is the Buddha's teaching that nothing arises independently. Everything comes into being based on conditions. Your actions today create conditions for tomorrow. The intentions you hold now shape the intentions that will arise later. This isn't mystical or abstract. It's observable in everyday life. If you spend your morning scrolling through outrage on social media, what intention gets strengthened? Probably irritation, judgment, reactivity. Then you go into your day already primed for conflict, already tilted towards seeing what's wrong. But if you spend your morning in meditation, or in quiet reflection, or simply moving slowly with awareness, what gets strengthened? Probably calm, clarity, presence. Then you go into your day from a different place entirely. Your actions arise from conditions, what you did before, what you're exposed to, what you've been practicing, and your actions create conditions for your next action, for your mental state, for how others respond to you, for the world around you. The question is, are you creating conditions consciously with awareness of your intentions, or are you just reacting, letting whatever conditions arise push you around? There's a difference between aligning with the Dharma and forcing your ego's agenda. When you're forcing, there's strain, stress, a feeling of pushing against reality. You have a plan for how things should be, and you're determined to make it happen regardless of conditions, regardless of wisdom, regardless of the actual situation. But when you're aligning with the Dharma, there's effort, but not strain. There's action, but not forcing. You're working with conditions rather than against them. This doesn't mean being passive or giving up on goals. It means recognizing that results arise when causes and conditions ripen, not when you desperately demand them. In monastic communities, teachers sometimes see practitioners who exhaust themselves trying to force awakening, trying to control their progress, trying to make things happen on their timeline. But there's often a moment when something shifts. The practitioner stops forcing and starts simply practicing, following the precepts, sitting in meditation, studying the teachings, serving the community, just doing what's in front of them with right intention, without grasping at outcomes. And often, that's when real progress happens. Not because they stopped trying, but because they stopped trying to control what can't be controlled. They aligned their actions with the Dharma and trusted the process. This is walking the path with open hands. You hold your intentions clearly: renunciation, goodwill, harmlessness. You take action based on those intentions, but you don't clench your fists around specific outcomes. You trust the Dharma more than you trust your plan. You trust that if you act with right intention, from right understanding, following the Noble Eightfold Path, the results will take care of themselves. Not necessarily the results you imagined or wanted, but the results that actually serve the end of suffering. The Four Noble Truths become your guide, more reliable than your ego's desires. You understand suffering when you see it. You recognize craving and clinging when they arise. You know that letting go leads to peace. You walk the path that the Buddha laid out. This is enough. You don't need to know exactly where you're going or exactly how you'll get there. You just need to keep walking with right intention, step by step, moment by moment. The Buddha's final words to his attendant Ananda were, "Be a lamp unto yourself." He didn't say, "Follow my instructions perfectly forever." He didn't say, "Cling to these teachings as ultimate truth." He said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." Take refuge in your own practice, your own investigation, your own understanding of what creates suffering and what leads to its end. This is the final teaching about intention. You are responsible for your own liberation. Not the Buddha, not any teacher, not any teaching, you. But you're not alone in this responsibility. You have the Dharma as a guide. You have the Sangha as support. You have the Buddha's example, showing that it's possible. And you have this moment, right now, where you can check your intention and choose toward grasping or toward letting go, toward ill will or toward goodwill, toward harm or toward harmlessness. Every moment is this choice, and every choice shapes what comes next. So before you act, before you speak, before you even think, look beneath, look at the intention that lives there, and ask yourself, what am I strengthening right now? Because what you strengthen today becomes who you are tomorrow. And who you are tomorrow shapes the world you create, the suffering you cause or relieve, the freedom you experience or deny yourself. This is the power and responsibility of right intention. It shapes everything. Remember the question from the beginning. Where are you standing right now? 3 hours have passed, and the question hasn't changed, but perhaps your seeing has. As this new year begins, you don't need transformation. That's just another form of grasping, another project for a self that cannot be found. What happened here, if anything, was unveiling. The peace you're seeking was always available. The strength you need was always within you. You just stopped long enough to notice. The Buddha's path is gradual, walked one step at a time, one breath at a time, one moment of right intention at a time. So don't make this complicated. 5 minutes of meditation tomorrow morning, that's all. One precept followed carefully this week. One moment of pausing before you speak to check your intention today. Discipline, then peace, then wisdom, each supporting the next, each growing naturally when conditions are right. The Buddha said, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." And that step, it begins tomorrow. When your alarm rings, when you choose to rise with intention, when you face this new year, not with fear, but with clarity. You take refuge in the Buddha who showed the way, the Dharma that guides the path, the Sangha that walks beside you. You're not alone in this. Millions of practitioners across thousands of years have walked exactly where you're walking now. May all beings be free from suffering. May this new year bring you peace, clarity, and the courage to walk your path with an open heart. The path begins with the step you take tomorrow.